It seems like ages since the Pan America was gracing our roads here in the UK, and that's because of the fork seal failure we had on both forks. So the forks now, we've got them back. They've been sent away to have them done professionally. We'll go through the reason why I did that, because as you guys know, I like to do every repair here myself in the ALCHEMOTO garage. But obviously we'll get into the reasons why these were sent away, but we will show you guys the procedure and putting them back and just explain a little about the removal process and where everything goes when we put these back on the bike. So I'll bring you guys a little bit closer. So as you can see, it's no small job to remove your front end and your forks and everything off your Pan America, because obviously you've got to take your wheel off, your spacers and your axle, your calipers, before you can go ahead and remove the forks off the bike. But also you've got the wiring for the ARH. So the wires that you see coming out the top of your forks, where do they go? And that's the reason why you've got to remove the tank, folks, because under here you have a little socket with the wiring in on both sides of the bike. So you've got the two for on here, where you've got the two wires coming out. On the other side, the two plugs are there, and that's the reason why you have to remove the tank to get at these wires. But while it's off, you can give everything a good look at and a good clean any other connectors up. There's a few that I had that were a little bit of green on the wiring, so while this is all off, it gives you a chance to clean all that up before you put it back. So you can see the clamps here. So we're going to fit the front forks, go through on the service book procedure, the measurement between here and the top of the forks. You get everything correct when you put it back. So of course, while the tank's been off, you might as well clean and polish that. So we've done a 3-stage polish on that and then ceramic coated the tank. Of course, I repainted this tank last year after having a chip on it here from the Outer Hebrides tour. Really annoyed the hell out of me. So we repainted the tank here in the ALCHEMOTO workshop, and I've not detailed it since. So while it's been off, it's had a detail and a ceramic coating. So lovely and shiny in original colour, waiting to go back on the bike. Now, we did have the rear wheel off as well on the bike while we was doing the maintenance work and waiting for the forks. We'll show you a picture of that now in the bike when it was in its stripped down form. I've not done any video on fitting the rear wheel, because obviously I've done the chain and sprocket one not too long back. But while the wheel's been off, we've cleaned the wheel and spokes and ceramic coated those, and then fitted new rear brake pads as well while we are at it. Of course, you can see the new bolts in there as well. So we've got the new rotor bolts, so nice and shiny. And of course, the other fork to go back on the bike. So when I took my forks off, there's a special tool made by Bosch for Harley-Davidson, who designed it for the Pan America. And you can't get the tool anywhere for taking the top nut off the forks. It's a special tool with holes in it and a cutout for the wiring, and you just cannot find it anywhere. So I took my forks down to Key Suspension in Atherton, which is quite localish to me. It was just a handy one to take there and have them professionally do the work. So when I say all was not well with the rebuild of the front forks, we'll just skip forward a few weeks, and the fork, right-hand fork, is back off the Pan America, because constantly since it was built, we did the Highland tour, the Islands and Islands tour, which is on the channel as well if you fancy watching that, if you haven't done already. And you'll see that on that tour I was constantly having ARH issues. The rear was dropping down but not the front, and the fault was due to the right hand ARH fork assembly having the faults, which I'll put back on the screen now and show you what they were. So I'll just bring you to what I've done with stripping the fork assembly and show you what I've found so far. Okay, so you can see here, right hand fork is off the bike, and we don't have to remove this one. It was just the right hand one because that's where the problems were lying. So over to the bench, and you can see we have stripped the fork down. You can see the clamp I made there out of a jockey leg clamp off a trailer. So we've got the fork tube down there, and then this is the ARH assembly stripped down on my bench. You can see here the electrical connectors, and you see where I've bared these off as well from the plug, which you'll find under the tank, which is this one here. So I'd already played around with this, and I thought they might have reversed it when the forks are stripped down and the seals replaced. but that wasn't the case. It was just bringing up another error. But if I bring you closer, and you can see the colour of the wire on the earth wire, it's a nice golden colour. And you can see on the white wire, it's a lovely black colour. So something's been earthing out there, and we've chased the wiring back, and I'll just show you what I've found. So we've got the multimeter on here, and if I just get the enemy probes, that'll help. Bench is a bit of a mess. So we've got that on a beeper. So we can test the wiring on each side from these points here, which are the contact points where the two wires go onto here and then onto this bit here when you push that back onto them. So that's the two contacts. So what I was getting, we'll just put the white one on here, which is that one. And you can see we've got that in continuity now at the moment. And then we'll try the black one. And continuity there. What was happening before is you could cross over to this one, and I was getting the buzzer on both the earth and positive contacts. So at the moment I haven't done. So whatever I've done inside here seems to have cured that problem. And I thought I could do it by stripping the wire back as far as I could without removing the forks, but every time I tested it, I was getting continuity across the positive and the earth. So for some reason now I haven't. So I need to remove these contacts. These, I don't know what these are. They're about a 5 or 5.5 mil. Tiny little brass screw to get these out, and they're a pain to get something in there. They've got to be a very, very shallow socket to get these out. I'll find something to remove that so I can just replace this wiring completely from inside here, and then I'm happy then once I de-pin this connector and then put them back into this plug here, and then we should be good to go. Okay folks, so you can see we've got the wire off here now from the top of the ARH unit, and we're going to do a continuity test. So I've got it on the black wire here now, and if I just go onto the other side of the wire here, and looking at the multimeter, 000.2, so that's good enough for me. Swap to the white. And you can see those readings now are all over the place. So you know you've got a problem with that wire, and that's the one that's been causing the problems. That is not a good wire at all. So we can pull it, move it, get it down to 001.5, and as soon as we move it around, those readings are off the scale. So that's the wire we've got to replace. Okay folks, go back to the start of the video, and the reason why I sent the forks away is because I was losing time before the Highland trip. I had fork seals leaking, so I took it to the professionals, and obviously ever since then I've had the fault, and I could not get the tool to strip the forks myself. So as I was looking for the tool and time was rolling on, that's why they were sent away, and obviously I've had the problems ever since. So obviously having to do the strip down myself, I made the tool, the pin tool myself, out of a multi-spanner. Sometimes get these with spray guns. It was the only thing I had to hand that had the width across here, and you can see I've drilled it. I drilled these at 25 mil apart. I was a little bit too short, so you can see I've splayed them slightly. So if we measure this across center to center, is actually, I think my drilling was out, it's still 25 mil. So if you did them at 25 mil exactly, then that pin tool is good to remove the cap on the front of your ARH. So underneath where the little 4 screws are, you lift that up, and then the cap underneath, you'll see it. That takes it off and allows you to strip your ARH assembly, if you're gonna go that far yourselves. So the pin tool is obviously going in here. I've got bad lighting in here at the moment. I've got light coming through on my window, but if we just put some extra light in here, and you can see where the pin tool needs to be across there. And these are the 2 wires that we've got to repair down here. And then that removes, you can see the thread on here, the cap. And then obviously to remove this, you've got like a spring locking ring there, and that's to remove the spring off. You probably don't need to go as far as what I've done there. The rest is just standard fork tube maintenance. And obviously, always handy if you get the workshop manual as well for the Pan America. Okay folks, so once you've got everything back together, it's easy to assemble back into the fork tube itself. So we've got that now in my little homemade clamp, which is a 48mm jockey leg for a trailer, just mounted in a plate, so that just grips it nice. And then fork leg, obviously, once it's clamped, you've got your inner piston assembly here, and it's just proud enough for you to get your oil in. So it's 417 mils of oil in a nice jug. That goes down there. There is measuring tools, but as long as you know that that's the exact amount in there, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so taking the left fork, try and make this so you guys can see everything that's going on. When you pass it through the lower fork clamp, obviously push the wire through first. And just like so. So the measurement you want from here to the bottom clamp, we'll go through that right now. We'll just put a bolt in here just to loosely clamp it, and then we'll measure it. Okay, so you want to take a tape measure, and the top of the tape measure should be right on the top of the fork, and then to the top of the top clamp. So it's the top of the clamp, not the bottom of the clamp here. So right from the top of the fork to the top of the clamp, you want 224.2 millimeter. So that's 8.84, is it? Or 8.82 inches. 8.83 inches to be exact, 224.2. So that's not a bad guess, actually. I'm 225. So that's not a bad guess. We go 224. That's bang on. Okay, folks. So on your right hand fork leg, that's 234.2. 234.2. So you're 10 millimeter more on this one, because obviously it's a little bit higher on this than the other side. 234.2 from the top of there. So it's easier actually to do it this way, to measure from the top of the clamp. 234.2. So I need to be round about there. 232.2. Okay, what you can actually do before you clamp these up tight is just check your axle with alignment. Something I always do when I take them off. So if you line these up, just push them through. If that threads into that with no bite, which it is doing, there you go, she's threading in. What you don't want to do is have these out of alignment. If you're not sure of your measurements between your right and your left hand fork, this is going to be off center, and that's what you don't want. So just by doing that, you know that that is going to thread into there, okay? With your wheel on, and everything's going to be into alignment. So you know that that is absolutely fine, and the alignment of your axle is right with what's going to be up there. Now, of course, on your right-hand module, both wires coming out the top of your ARH goes into one plug. So you can't go wrong. In theory, that is. And that one is done. Just make sure, again, your wiring is free. That follows the other wiring into the back of here. So we'll cable tie all this back in a bit. And then just test your steering right to left and make sure everything is clear. One thing you might have noticed is this is your main fuse, okay? So whenever you're doing anything like this, the bike has been out of action now for about 3 weeks or so. But if I'm doing any work electrical on this, pull the main fuse. So what you'll do is you'll put the ignition on. So your ARH, if you've got ARH on your bike, so your suspension drops, and then you've took the preload off here, which is fine then for stripping down the forks or anything to do any work. With me taking these obviously to key suspension, I want the preload off this so there was no load on there when they did the work on it. So by putting the ignition on and letting the forks drop, the preload is off and then it's safe to work on the forks. But also by taking the main fuse out, there's been no power going to the computer with anything unplugged and no fault codes. So when we put it on, it should reset itself with everything plugged in. So I'll bring you to the service book. The lighting's not that good here. Let's just bring you closer. Okay, so there is the lower and upper pinch bolts, 15 to 18 foot-pounds, 20.4 to 25 Newton meters. And then we'll just scroll down. So the method of fastening these is to anything you do with a multiple number of bolts. It says here about measuring the distance from the top of the fork tube to the lower fork bracket to set the fork height. Refer to the table. We'll go down to that bit which we just did in a bit. Tighten the lower fork bracket pinch screws. Alternatively, top fastener, bottom fastener. Repeat until specification is maintained. 15 to 18 foot-pounds for the fork bracket lower pinch screw. It's there in black and white. Okay, so this is where you're doing the measurement. So it shows in the service book here between the top and the top of the lower bracket here. The distance here, which we just went through at 224.2 and 234.2 for the right hand fork with ARH. Without ARH, it's both 224.2 millimeters. Okay, so we're ready to put the axle through the front wheel now. So we're going to take the sensor and that needs to go into here. And then we'll line the axle up on the other side. So you've got your wheel speed sensor in the bearing on the right way. Rotation's correct. Sensor into here and then we'll put the axle through. Okay, so with the ABS sensor into here, like so. And then the wire coming through just like that. Take that wire out of the way and then we're ready to put the axle through. Okay, so what I always do is align the jack so it's level with the center of the wheel. You can see when I put the axle in here, it's going through without even having to touch the tire. The only thing is I've just knocked the sensor off there. It's an absolute pain to get that one right, so I'll just fiddle around for a minute. And then she's through. So what you want to make sure is when you tighten your axle up, is that your ABS sensor is nice and free on the axle with a little bit of rotation. So don't forget when you're putting your caliper bolts back in, Harley's favourite tool is a little bit of Loctite. You don't need a lot, it's just on the end of the thread there. And never use high strength, always use medium strength Loctite, unless you want arms like a gorilla every time you want to take them off. Okay, so that's the front wheel on. Just got to tighten up the front axle, but at the same time I'm going to do the rear axle and adjust the chain so I know I've done the front and back so they can be ticked off the list. All the wiring's tidied up under there. We've tested the steering to make sure none of the wire is pulling. So the only thing is now we've got to put the tank back on, plug that tank in, which is an absolute pain. Sometimes it goes on straight away, sometimes it's a little bit fiddly to get the two tank bolts in, but we'll show you guys how, and then we'll complete the job. So loosely place this in position. We've got a couple of wires that we need to connect. So what I always do is lay this down, and then you want a block of wood under this bit here. So at the front you'll notice we've got this wire here, which is the fiddly one. There's a little plug down the back of here. We'll show you that when we plug that in a bit. And we've got the overflow pipe here and the return pipe here. Okay, so a breather, a return pipe, and then that goes onto this down here, okay? Okay, so the most elusive plug in history is my supersized fingers, this purple one down here. So the one with a little purple colour on it is the one from your tank is going to go on, and you can't go wrong because it's this shape of plug. Okay, so the other elusive plug on the tank is this one. Sorry, the lighting's crap. And if you look underneath the tank, you can see just at the top of there is where it plugs into. So it's a little bit of a pain. So you've got to reach under there and then plug it in before you drop this tank down. Okay, so your fuel line here tucks down the back of this one and then into here. So that's the last thing you're going to do. So if you're going to remove the tank, that's the first thing you're going to do. And then the tank bolts as well, which are bolted in through here on both sides. So it's just one there, and then the bracket at the front of the tank. So you've got that there, the plug on the other side, the overflow line, and then the main electric feed for the fuel sender under here. Okay folks, so the latest update is the bike is 99% back together. I've just got to put the front cowling on, one wire and the front fender. So I'm going to kick the ignition up now. Let's have a look at this. Round. You just hear the little tiny noise from that fuel pump as well, which started going in the Isle of Mull from that shitty fuel. So I'm not too worried about that. Little bit of fuel additive, that should cure that down for a bit. But the bonus is, let's have a look at the dashboard. And if we go on to errors, bike errors, let's have a look, diagnostics. And with a bit of luck, there you go, BCM 0, ECM, ECU, no errors at all on my bike. So we'll have to start it up. How goddamn cool is that? That's the first time that orange triangle symbol has disappeared from my bike on startup since we were on tour in Scotland. Since my forks were rebuilt, that's the first time. So the errors were the wiring from the front ARH, which you're seeing from the preload, which I had to strip obviously to do that and then rewire it. And then the other one, funny enough, is this little solenoid baby here. So this wire which comes up through here and then through this little network of crap. Have I got my torch? Hang on. Camera's all over the place, folks. Okay, so the grey wire on the right hand side, I'm not going to point to it. You can just see on the right hand there, the little grey 2-pin wire. That one goes down to here. So for some reason, I had a short on the wiring down at that. They're only very, very tiny pins on the wiring, so they're a bit of a pain. So cleaning that connection, but why that hasn't come on before, and since I repaired the other side, suddenly it threw that one up when I put everything back together. But anyway, I'm not bothered. It's canvas, and that's what it does. It's a pain in the backside if you don't keep them terminals clean. So I'm going to spray them up, put the covers on, take the bike out for a little ride, and hopefully we've cracked it. Okay folks, so there you go, one fixed Pan America. So it's quite annoying really because the weather's been so good today and I could have got out on the sporty, but the pan needed fixing. Obviously this is my touring bike and we need it ready for the next few forthcoming rides. So hope you enjoyed watching the garage series from ALCHEMOTO today. If you've got any similar faults I can try to help you, please hit me up in the comments. But the most important thing is, if this is your first time watching ALCHEMOTO, please hit the subscribe button, please like, share and comment if you dare. Until the next time, folks, we'll see you later.